An Empire of Ice and Fire by Longclaw 1-6. Chapter 60. Whiteout. Oh. They marched single file down the gorge. Peeking slightly over the lip of the rock face that currently shielded them, John ducked back down after a split second. A walker led them from the van, likely explaining their seemingly organized nature. Normally, whites had the characteristics of an insect swarm. That is, none at all.
How many?
Mouthed Barristan, paired with him. At the first sight of the others, the group had dispersed into groups of 2 or 3 among the crags.
30,
John mouthed in return. Looking at Rob on his left and Jorah on his right, John held up all of his splayed fingers thrice over.
30,
John mouthed in return. Looking at Rob to his left and Jorah to his right, he held up all of his splayed fingers thrice over. The message was received. There was simply no way to coordinate an attack upon them all, but John knew his men would charge when he did. A good commander led from example. He feared his death. Any rational person would. But it was never about him. Looking at Barristan, the old knight nodded. Hand tightening on his sword, John gripped Longclaw.
No!
He leapt up, scrambling over the rock. Stunning the enemy for a split second as the ranging party burst into one staggered swoop from all around, the walker's surprise didn't seem to last long. Ice blue jaw dropping open in a primal scream, the undead drones under his command snarled and charged all around, programmed by instinct and magic to kill anything that moved. What whites lacked in skill they made up for in ferocity. The rangers were outnumbered 2 to 1, making for an even fight as pairs or clusters of whites were engaged with a single fighter, or pairs respectively. It soon became a melee of steel on steel. Rob and John found themselves face to face with the Walker, fitting since both were the only ones armed with Valyrian steel. Fury's lunges were parried by Ice Spear, the Walker a skilled fighter operating on tactics rather than sheer instinct. Rob, on the tip of ice narrowly missing the Walker's midsection, left his upper torso open. A punch to the chest sent him sprawling. Now it was the Walker and John, 1-on-1. Shrinking, the haunting blue of its eyes dark with anger, thrust his spear forward at John with all its might. John was quicker, however. Swinging Longclaw left and down, he parried the blow and sent the tip of the spear into the snow, opening the monster's arm for ice. Rob now scrambled to his feet to slice off the appendage. Still gripping the spear, the hand shattered into countless ice fractals. The Walker's eyes bulged open in stunned surprise before Grey Worm rammed his dragonglass spear through its torso. Soon the flecks of ice were joined by millions of others. In one fell swoop, all the snarling whites disintegrated before everyone's eyes, falling upon the ground in heaps of bone and rotting flesh.
The group looked at each other in confusion. What the hell happened?
Rob exclaimed.
They all just fell apart.
Jorah mused, puzzlement in his tone. John glanced at the flecks of ice beginning to blow away in the wind.
This Walker must have been the one that turned them.
Expression numb, Tayin collapsed onto the snow.
You told us about this, but you don't think it's real until... Fuck me.
To the northerners, growing up close to the wall with a sense of ancient horrors close by, it wasn't a hard leap to believe in the dead. But to someone from the south, such as why Jorah planned to capture one, to lay rest any and all doubts.
Your Majesty!
Catching Barristan's voice, John raced over to find the Emperor's guard knelt over Pip, a soft groaning leaving his mouth. Crimson stained his black cuirass from where a white's sword had slashed across. Kneeling as well, John looked at the wound and into Barristan's eyes. The old knight wore a grave expression.
I've seen wounds like this, sire. He doesn't have long with us.
Gripping the hand of his friend, one of his oldest friends, John tried to comfort him as best as he can.
Pip, rest easy.
A weary smile crossed over his face.
You'll be safe soon, brother. Safe and warm.
The afterlife was like that, from what he remembered. Weak, Pip nevertheless managed to squeeze John's hands.
But
My body. Don't let me become one of them, John. His voice wheezed, but it was firm. I shall, Pip. Good. A faraway look formed in his eyes. I'll see my family again, John. We'll rest and play in the shade of the trees. Smiling, his lids slid shut for the last time. Yet another brother of the Night's Watch, passing into the great beyond. Squeezing Pip's hand once more, John stood, fighting back the grief. Rob stepped beside him, arm wrapping around his shoulder comfortingly. Farewell, Pippa. Now your watch has ended. The others gathered around the body as Sir Jorah lit a torch and set the body ablaze, denying the Night King more meat for his army. Go! Leif yelled, tossing a dragonglass spear at a walker. It slammed into its midsection, collapsing it into a million flecks of ice. Cries from afar marked the heralds for the second to last of the children of the forest, killed by beings they had had a hand in creating. Spotting Mira pulling Bran towards the exit, Leif frowned. Summer! Summer, come on! But the direwolf only growled at the onrushing whites, leaping into the fray, sacrificing itself to save Bran and the others. Shedding a single tear for the beautiful creature, Leif raced around the corner into the tunnel. Tugging hard, arms burning from the inside out, Mira was so focused on dragging Bran to the rear exit that she didn't notice the dirt and rock above her hollow out. Snarling finally catching her attention, she spotted the rotting corpse as it dropped down onto her. Mira was knocked on her back, the wind kicking out of her. She lost her grip on the dragonglass knife, just out of reach. Half a rotted teeth and rusted Night's Watch sword raised high. The white was about to hack her to bits before a spear ran through its head. It fell silent. Eyes flickering to two figures, Mira's jaw dropped in shock. Sire! Standing above her, Grey Worm by his side, pulling his spear out of the white skull, was the Emperor, Jon himself. Get up, Lady Reed! He yelled, hacking into another white, a walking skeleton trying to claw at Leif's face. Tormund and Sir Barristan took Jon's place, holding off the trickle of the dead as he looked at Bran in panic. Is he? He's green-seeing, Mira shot back. Help me! Jon didn't hesitate, grabbing Bran's torso while Mira grabbed his legs. Man, with me! The faint and distant snarls turned into a cacophony of terror. Your Majesty! No look! Grey Worm hollered. Looking up despite the warning, Jon felt his heart smash into his ribs. A pure funnel of whites carpeting the walls of the cave like a swarm of ants, growing closer and closer. Fucking run! Tormund was booking it, as was Barristan. At the exit, swirling clouds of the blizzard trying their best to drown the snarls of the white swarm, Robb and Brienne were gesturing frantically. Come on! Go! Go! Behind, Leif tossed the last of the explosives, enough to shred the van of the swarm, but dozens more filled their place. Breathing hard and heart pumping, Robb dashed in and took Mira's place, racing faster with Jon out into the icy blast. Leaping across the threshold, Barristan had just cleared the cave when a white leapt upon his back, rasping and teeth snapping shut. Tie it up! Robb screamed, Tormund and Grey Worm pulling the writhing beast off of Barristan while he dashed in with the rope. Brienne, Tyene, Jorah and Gendry slammed into the thick but brittle wood door closed. A split second later, the snarling corpses slammed into it from the other side. The door rattled and groaned on its hinges at the indefatigable force pounding against it. That won't hold them for long, Tyene cautioned, only to be pulled out of the way by Grey Worm, bellowing an archaic war cry in a foreign, long-dead language. One heaved a massive boulder onto the patch of snow adjacent to the door, effectively sealing off the exit from the screeching swarm. I guess that works. That won't hold them forever, growled Tormund, breathing heavily as he knotted onto the rope around the monster. A fresh one, flesh not rotted yet, probably felled at Hardhome. The writhing white's motions lessened as Grey Worm draped a burlap hood over its head. Gotta get back to the castle, Crow. It took several seconds for all but Jon to figure out what he meant by Castle Black. The Emperor made the calculation in his head. We'd never make it. Not in this snow. Distant, faint growling belayed the massive army charging towards them. 2 miles north, pointed out Leaf. "There is a large lake with an island in the centre. The waters would stop them." Many looked at the child of the forest, the last remaining, as if she were mad. "Yeah, and we'd be fucking trapped," exclaimed Taine. Knowledge of the geography sent John's mind whirring. 1-1! The giant looked at him. John peered up at his most faithful fighter. "Get Bran and Mira to Castle Black as fast as you can." He looked at Mira. "Tell Ed and Sansa to set Rhaegal over here with all haste." "Your Majesty!" "Go!" Barely able to open her mouth to speak further, Mira found her and Bran scooped up in one's large hands, the giant almost immediately breaking into a run. "Men with me! To the lake!" None among them even hesitated, legs pumping as fast as they could. It was a race against death itself. Hot liquid flowing down her throat and warming her core, Sansa slowly set the cup of hot tea on the surface of the wooden table. Her hands were trembling out of sheer anxiety. Her other rested on the wood, fingers drumming the surface absent-mindedly. "Please, sister, stop." Faraway eyes drawn back to reality by the words of the Rose of Highgarden. Though Highgarden was currently the royal granary under the supervision of House Tarly, Sansa looked over at her brother's betrothed. What she found was something disconcerting. "Marjorie, dear, you look unwell." Marjorie was pale, far paler than the freezing temperatures could account for. The stewards of the Night's Watch kept the fire roaring, warming the hall. Dark circles covered her eyes, her hand pressed against her stomach. The red-haired reached out and comfortingly placed her hand over her sister's. "I am sure Rob is all right." Inwardly, she was telling it for both Marjorie and for herself. Closing her eyes, Marjorie looked like she was fighting tears. "I hope so." Taught by her grandmother to be cunning and manipulative, using her beauty and sweet nature, it had surprised her how she had fallen for the once fallen, now risen again young wolf. But she had. A political match rapidly becoming one of love as well. "At least your dashing knight is safe in Volantis." Eyes widening, Sansa pursed her lips. "I don't know what you mean." Through her churning stomach, Marjorie chuckled. "Oh, come now. Don't lie to your family." Jon's brand new commander in the new Valyria campaign, Podrick Payne. Sansa's blush turned her cheeks a rosy crimson. With all that was going on, she nearly forgot about the awkward young knight and his last letter to her. Nearly. He was a common thought during her restless nights, calming her. She narrowed her eyes at Marjorie. "Arya?" Her laugh brought a little bit of colour back into her face. "She is to be my sister as well. Have had to chat about something." Suddenly the levity left her. Turning green, Marjorie scrambled off her bench and towards an empty chamber pot in the corner. Out flung the meagre contents of her stomach, dry heaves racking her even as her system emptied. Kneeling by her side, Sansa rubbed her upper back like a mother had done so long ago. "What's going on, sister?" It couldn't be just for Rob. It almost seemed like, forgive me if this is off base, but when was your last moonblood? Marjorie shook her head, tears falling from her pale face. "No need." She wiped the last bits of fire from her mouth. "I'm with child. Rob's child. Mr. Raymer confirmed it before we left for here. I wanted to tell him, but..." Her face trembled, trying her best not to cry, to remain stoic as a high-born woman should be. Without words, Sansa hugged her. "I'm going to be an aunt. Again!" Booming across the landscape, even through the thickened stone of the Castle Black's central mass, Sansa could hear the deep horn blow. A relieved smile crossed her face. Glancing down at Marjorie. "They're back!" Her soon-to-be sister smiled. Her soon-to-be sister smiled weakly in return. Both smiles fell as another blast resonated through the air around them. "No! Dear gods, no!" One blast was for returning rangers. 2 blasts for wildlings. 3 blasts. "We're not ready!" Marjorie choked out. All the troops were all in the Riverlands. The Night's Watch was far too small, even with the extra 300 irredeemable prisoners sent after the Battle of Riverrun. Sansa's rapid prayers were quickly answered, for the 2 blasts of the horn atop the wall were followed by nothing else.
Thank the gods.
The relief turned to confusion. The lost wildlings were Mag and One bringing in the orphan giant babies. All others were presumed to have either died or lived in the free folk settlements in the Gift. The door opened and Lord Commander Edison Tollett burst in.
My ladies, it is the giant. One. He's carrying something.
Both of them looked at each other. Someone must have been wounded. Why else would One be carrying them? And where were the rest? Without a word, they followed Ed out into the courtyard, gingerly holding something in his outstretched palms. One had just ducked underneath the lip of the tunnel exit. The 2 ladies scrambled down the stairs as the giant set down a quiet Mira and an unconscious Bran, still trapped in whatever vision he had. Mira! Sansa knelt beside Bran, feeling for his pulse. Once she found one, she looked up at her. What happened? Where are the others? She dreaded her answer, hoping against all hope that it wasn't what she dreaded.
She was shaking. They saved us from the others. But we were going to get overrun. John told One to take us back here, while they headed somewhere to haul up.
Mira began to break into frantic begging.
We need to get Edaron! Get the dragons to John!
Suddenly twin roars bellowed from atop the wall. All looked up, seeing Rhaegal and Edaron spread their massive wings and leap off the top. Far above, a winged black shape and several smaller shadows soared below the grey clouds.
Daenerys,
Sansa muttered, watching the 2 others join the convoy of dragons in their relief force. She bowed her head in silent prayer. Chilling them to the bone, the polyglot ranging force pulling over their first tighter for their frames in the harsh northern wind. For some, Jon, Tormund and the others from north of Mount Caelan, it was just a minor nuisance. For others, Grey Worm, Gendry and those from the warmer southern regions, the gusts stabbed at them worse than any spear or sword, and the wind was the only sound of note at the present time. Mournful howling pierced the din of discomforting silence.
7 fucking hells!
Diane Martell, having never known the north outside of the warmth of Winterfell, definitely not the icebox of the Land of Always Winter, was starting to go mad. Grabbing a rock from the ground, she threw it at the wall of dead men surrounding them on all sides. It hit the skull of a skeleton white, causing the weakly attached head to fly off and the body to collapse into a pile of bones. The others around it just stood there in formation, tighter than any Bolton or unsullied phalanx. After hundreds ploughed through the weak ice into the frozen lake below, none had followed. Thus beginning the tense standoff. Rolling his shoulders, Robb made to sat next to Jon and Gendry.
Think One made it.
Jon peered out, finding the Night King and a cluster of White Walkers overlooking them.
One is large enough to take down all but a large swarm. All I hear, so I'm optimistic.
He adjusted his black Night's Watch cloak. Despite his watch having ended, Jon kept it, a reminder of his humble origins so as not to let the power go to his head.
Edaron and Rhaegal. If they're coming, Rhaegal knows to be cautious. He barely survived the last time.
Robb nodded, remembering that terrifying moment.
Brother, if we are making it out of this, I'm marrying Marjorie. We agreed to wait until after Joffrey was defeated, but life's too short.
His time with Talisa was far too short. Looking up, Robb was certain that wherever she was, his first love would want him to find happiness. Clasping his hand, Jon smiled at his brother.
Tell you what, we'll do it at the Godswood in Winterfell. I'll even officiate as your emperor. Fitting for my Warden of the North.
Reminding himself that Gendry was there, the former smith sitting quietly, Jon turned to him.
And what about you, Gendry? You're planning to do right by my sister?
Talking about marriage plans was quite out of place with death staring them in the face, but what else were they to do? Blinking, Gendry's mouth opened and closed several times before he could speak.
I would marry Arya tomorrow if we can free from King's Landing. But I'm just a simple Waters, not fit for a highborn.
Frown on his face, Jon remembered the same thoughts between him and Dany. Well, it had taken years to rectify that for him. Jon would rectify this now.
Well, How would you like to be legitimised?
He and Rob shared a laugh at Gendry's wide eyes.
Why not? Renly and Stannis are dead, and you have just as strong a claim to the Stormlands as Tommen.
Rob couldn't think of a better choice. Before Gendry could even respond, Jon finished.
It's settled. You're now Joffrey Baratheon, rightful Lord Paramount of the Stormlands.
The new Lord Baratheon, in name for now, smiled sheepishly, not feeling much different now that he had a name and a highborn title. At that moment, Tyene reminded them of the present situations. Damn it! Why can't this fucking end? She spied a target. Fucking morons! Arms pulled back, she let loose another rock fly. Despite her unassuming exterior, the throw was powerful. Her aim was true. It smacked the walking skeleton in the lower jaw, breaking it off. The bone clattered on the ice. The white it had belonged to standing as ramrod straight as before. These fucking things have no fucking brains!
Don't do that,
Tormund grumbled, sharpening one of his dragonglass axes with a whetstone. They were all on edge, straddling a fine line between utter boredom and sheer terror. But provoking the dead shits was simply not productive. Too angry and frustrated, Tyene didn't even hear Tormund. Venting her frustration out on the whites, the Dornish pretender chucked another rock at the same white. Only in her rage, the aim was off. Was short. The rock hit the ice, skidding along the surface till it smacked into the rotting leather boot of the skeleton. The beast's sightless skull lowered, contemplating the situation before it.
Jon stood, sensing the shift in the tenor of the air. The others sensed it too. 7 hells,
mumbled Rob, unsheathing ice. Tyene scrambled back, brought out her dual blades.
I told you not to fucking do that!
Tormund drew his axes. Drawing his weapon, Jon closed his eyes and took a deep breath as the white took its first steps onto the newly hardened ice. End of chapter. Hi guys, hope you enjoyed that. Oh boy, okay, that was eventful. Marjorie's pregnant. Whoop whoop whoop. Anyway, yeah. Whoa. Okay. Yep. Very intense. Anyway, you guys know the drill. Like, comment and subscribe. Check out my other videos. And remember to have a good day, night, or whatever time zone you're in. Bye my guys, gals, and non-binary pals. I'll see you in another video. Bye!